to remind.
Exactly. Now it's probably going to prompt you all to say, oh, do you realize this meeting's being recorded? Do you want to be a part of this? That's usually part of my presentation. I say, if you're on the LAM or if you're on the, if you're on witness protection, you should definitely keep your video off right now.
We're all friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I'm curious.
Mhm.
I mean, do you invest differently? Are there different answers to these questions, whether if you're investing in a retirement fund account or a regular portfolio? Because to me, there are a couple of things that, I find interesting. One of which is, I think that one of the things that I watch on the SSG, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is if you look at the SSG, in most cases, the low price in the subsequent year is lower than the high price in the previous year. So essentially what we're doing is we're riding PEs back down. And I think in a retirement account where there isn't a tax consequence in the immediate moment, you may sell on a different basis. You may sell quicker rather than ride the PEs down. And I think that's something to think about. The other thing that my personal feeling is on selling is, if something's overvalued enough to sell, the entire holding is overvalued enough to sell. It's either overvalued or it isn't. And, with that being the case, I've decided I'm no longer going to sell partial holdings. Because if part of it's too expensive to keep holding, how can you say the rest of it isn't too expensive to keep holding?
well, to that argument, question, I would say that, if you're thinking about selling, like in the case of you put X number of dollars into Tesla and you're not sure about it, you could sell half of it and pull your equity, put what you've invested plus more out, because you don't know what's going to happen too. So even though it's overvalued, like it has been the last 12 years, right? If it continues to climb, how are you going to feel? If it comes down, it's one thing, but if it continues to climb and remains overvalued for years, how are you going to feel that if you missed out potentially? That's why it's like, I think we talked about this locally with our chapter, and the psychology of it is that if you pull half out, like everything you've invested in it, if you've had that run up, and even that you've considered it overvalued, you pull that out, you're a winner both ways, because if it continues to climb, you're getting that growth, but you've pulled out what you put in. And if it continues to drop, you've pulled out what you put in, and you can still buy more at that point. So, by selling all of it, I mean, that again, you could talk to 10 people and have 10 different answers. If that's the right decision for you, that's great. But there's other considerations too. And, such as what type of account is it, whether it's after tax, whether it's traditional IRA, or whether it's a Roth IRA.
Right.
Right.
I
think that's a big point. It's, to some extent, this is account type specific. And you may make different decisions in different types of accounts.
That's a true statement, Avi. The ones that I've been talking about have been in my Roth IRA or my traditional IRA. My brokerage account that I have for that's not an IRA, I pretty much put stocks in there that I'm going to let go, and so that their dividend increases. So for my initial purchase price, each year that they increase the dividend, I increase the return on my original investment to where later on I'm going to be paying just capital gains on it, not for income like I do for my other two. So you're right. That's a thing to consider.
Well, the other thing about this is that some of these stocks that aren't, that we're talking about, like Zoom and Tesla, are ones that you really can't do an SSG on. They just really don't have the same type of metrics, but they're sweetheart stocks. People love them. So they're going up irrationally. And you really want to kind of be along for the ride, but at the same time, there's nothing to back it up. So at some point it is going to crash, but you don't want to lose $20,000 because you're a little too conservative. So it's I guess this is a better investing kind of conversation in a lot of respects.
Yeah, I mean,
To-
I think of those as kind of gambling stocks that you can't value. And ultimately, for me, what that comes down to is how much of it am I willing to risk losing?
Right.
If I started with 10,000, now it's 40,000. Am I willing to risk 40,000? Maybe not, but I'm willing to risk 20,000. And in those cases, I think on the gamble type of stocks, you make those decisions very differently than you do on one which you can evaluate on an SSG.
Well, and to bring home the point and bring back to better investing is, in that type of, for an example, when we first got COVID and the whole market went down initially, we didn't know how long it was going to be down with the economy closed and the businesses closed and that kind of thing for what they said was going to be 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever turned into 2 years or whatever. But, one of the stocks that I held at that point in an after-tax account was a better investing, I'll say, favorite of Paychecks, right? So if you've heard of this or followed this stock, I had that in my after-tax account and took the capital gains, which were lower at that point because the market had come down, and I sold those shares in that account, put the money into the Roth that year, and bought the shares over there. So long-term, I still had the stock, but it was in a better growth type of account for that. So, that's one example of, being aware of what kind of account that you've got it in.
Yeah, that's an excellent strategy. I like that.
Avi, one of the things about selling, it would be your example there. If you're going to sell some of it, sell all of it. I may not sell all of it because I would just want to sell enough so that I reduced my percent of that in my portfolio. I don't really want to get rid of it, but it's grown to where it's like 20%, and most of my other ones are 5 or 6%. So that's why I would just sell part of it to rearrange the portfolio. Your other point about is if you've lost faith in it, then take that money and buy something that you might have a little more faith in.
Or might be
Yeah,
more
I mean,
holding.
there's definitely validity in selling for rebalancing, but that's a different sell than not having faith or thinking it's so overpriced that there's no upside or minimal upside.
Yeah, and definitely keep balancing course forces you to sell high. Hopefully. So I think we've does anyone have any other comments or thoughts about the topic of how to navigate a crazy market? Or do you want to open the floor? Should we open the floor to just any old random investing questions that people have?
Well, I've been cleaning out my attic, and I've
We can talk about that, Bob.
Find up
And I've gone through some old statements, and back a few years ago, the average PE was like 10. Now you got 30, 40, 50 PEs. I'm wondering, when you do an SSG, should you be more conservative in establishing your average PE or your high PE? That's what I've been cutting it down some. I think PEs are going to be coming down.
Oh, they're definitely coming down.
Yeah.
And you also have to be careful of which company you're evaluating within an industry, because you've got some PEs within like some industries that are like 10, but some that have been 30 or 40 or can't even be calculated because they're off the chart, possibly like a Tesla. So you got to be careful. And I would say that if you're in an investment club, or if you've got some, a friend that's a better investing member as well, what I always found interesting is that if you do, if like all of us here did an SSG on the same company, I always found it interesting, the results when you compared it back to to everybody else, because you'd have some people that are very conservative and you'd have other people that are very aggressive. Doesn't mean that either one's right, or you take the average and put it in the middle kind of thing. But I think that makes a good comparison kind of conversation. Why did you choose that for high price versus what I chose or whatever? And if different people know different things about the company or the industry, it makes for a good conversation.
I like to look at the PE on big charts. I think this is from the class Mike Toberson. Is that his name?
Torbenson.
Where
Yeah,
he
Mike
told,
Torbenson.
okay, where he told us on big charts what settings to put. And I saved those settings. And so when I look at, I'm evaluating all my stocks on the SSG. And then of course on research tab, you can go to big charts. And if I see the PE going down, it's trending down, and the EPS is trending up, that's a really good sign. And so it's more, with me, it's more a comparison of a PE that is a historical PE of that particular stock. That's kind of how I treat, that's one of the things I do with PE, but
I think a lot of people have forgotten about PEs the last decade or so because they've just been so off the charts and overpriced. But like everything else, it's kind of come back to earth these days. So, I think it's a good evaluation of a company of those fundamentals when you look at the sales and the earnings per share and the net profit. You know what I mean? The fundamentals are great in evaluating a company long term.
And that's the key right there, is long term, because you've got all this real consumer activity happening, right? Where anybody can just buy stocks who doesn't know anything about evaluating them. They like the name, they like the owner, whatever. But long term, reality should prevail. It should matter whether the company's actually making a profit. It should matter whether they have any, whether the accounting works when you, take away, when you look at this balance sheets.
I kind of look at the, for the PE, and I don't know where I learned this, but if the earnings per share have decreased from the previous year, that usually means that the PEs are both going to be inflated. So I'll get rid of those. That's kind of one of the things I do. When I get done with that, the 35 or something like that, but we've already discussed it. If the whole industry is higher than that, you'll go that. What I then look at is the current PE divided by the 5-year average PE to find out what the relative value is. And if that's somewhere close to 1, then I feel a little bit comfortable, whatever the PE is. If the current PE is significantly higher, so that the relative value is 125 or 150, then I kind of figure out I'll come back to that SSG later and go on to another one.
Yeah. And that's the flip side of what Carolyn was just saying, that she likes it when the PE is down and the EPS is up. And you're saying when the PE is up and the EPS is down, that you want to sell. Carolyn wants to buy. So those are great indicators to use.
Or I think he was saying if he's looking at it for an investment and it's too high, then he's going to revisit it later. But yeah.
Right. Sorry.
I am so impressed with the SSG because I started back in the 1980s at the beginning. I had to look up all of the data. I had a ruler that I had to put on the SSG to figure out the trend line. And now it is so different. It blew my mind.
Yeah, it's come a long way. It's a great tool to
Yeah.
have, and they made it a lot easier than what it, when we used to do it with paper and pencil.
And then you had the
I
little
will-
template that had the two different angles on it, so that you can do it, whether it's a 5-year or the 10-year. And don't forget the big eraser. I
Right.
always had one of those.
Yeah,
I
don't do
will
that.
say I miss the multicolored pencils.
Yeah,
Anyone else have a thought or a question that they'd like to bring up? We have about 6 minutes left. So we're, like I said, this is your meeting. So tell us what you'd like to talk about.
Well, when I evaluate a stock to buy, and that's kind of where I am in this era right now, I'm not thinking so much of selling. I also use the PERT. I put it on my watch list, and then I have all my watch lists, and I use the PERT to kind of, also use another indicator of whether, the stock is meeting my expectations kind of thing, or my judgments. And I don't know if other people do that, or if a PERT is helpful in that respect to others. I don't know.
Who else uses PERT as part of their analysis?
Oh, this is Jane. I was going to say something else, but carry on with your PERT
No, that's okay,
conversation.
Jane. Let's hear what you have to say. Jump in.
Okay. I was going to say something that we sort of take for granted, but maybe we shouldn't, is that we're not talking to everyone who invests in stocks or invests in the stock market. We're talking to people who look at these things logically and try their best to use logic. So
And take the emotion out of it a little bit.
well, not just the emotion, but people whose mental sort of bent is towards looking at things logically. It may be not the emotions one side of it, but also just the way people think. We're the people we're talking to are people who think or try to think logically about these things. So that's my comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And that's what we're talking about the whole consumerism, where people are just like, oh, my friend told me to invest in this. And that was my MO before. Somebody said, I heard two people talking in the grocery store about a stock, I'd go home and buy it. Big surprise. I wasn't very successful.
Well, it all
I
depends.
learned to invest from my parents. My parents used to listen to their friends who had more money and used to invest, and they talk about a stock they did really well, and my parents would buy it just when it was essentially at its high PE and then lose their shirt. That's how I learned to invest.
All you got to do is make two right decisions: when to buy and when to sell. Right.
That's it. So simple. Exactly.
To Carolyn's point about the PERT tool, honestly, I used to use that when I had the toolkit software, and I really liked that. That was, one of the other tools that you could kind of put all the, it took all the numbers that you put in on the SSG and it kind of threw them into the PERT. And when you flipped it over to see the graph, you could kind of see the trending. And I kind of appreciated that. Honestly, I'm still kind of learning with some of the online tools. So that's a work in progress for me.
Well, in the last 3 minutes, I'm curious as to if anyone has a topic they'd like to request for the September meeting, or a person who they'd like to request to talk to us for the September meeting. I mean, we could talk about how to use the PERT analysis in your stock investing. We could talk about, I don't know, whatever y'all want. I mean, that we are 100% here to serve you. So we want to hear what you feel like maybe your knowledge is a little light on a certain topic, or maybe you're really good at something and you realize that other people in your club don't really understand it. Anything that you'd find helpful. And you don't have to answer right now. You can always get back to us later.
Stock to study and in industry to look at. Tool you either want to share or want more information about.
Okay, well, I'll leave you all to think about that. In parting, in our last 2 minutes, does anyone want to say anything? Phil, do you want to say anything to close, or does anyone else have any comments?
Just that, again, like Chris said, these are kind of your meetings, our meetings kind of thing. It's a great, national convention or, those kind of things. I've always found it useful and helpful, as well as interesting to have conversations with other like-minded people to identify stocks or evaluate stocks or do a stock study, that kind of thing. So, I just appreciate the community here, and all of you attending and contributing to the conversation.
Very much so. This is a lot of fun for us in the education committee, so we want to keep you all coming so we can keep doing it. Right, Phil?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. One of the things the DC and Maryland chapter do on the first Monday is we go through 4 stock selection guides in the BI magazine, and 2 core and 2 plus, and we try and do it 11 minutes on each one, so we get right through it in an hour. If you wanted to, I'd go on to the DC chapter, to their events, and look for digging in the BI magazine. It's a real quick way to see how 4 different people attack going through an SSG. In 11 minutes, you don't get bogged down in the minutia. We have to get through it and put down things. So that's just something to go along with. This was an excellent meeting tonight. Glad I made it.
Thank you. Awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So we have no time left, but does anyone have a semiconductor company that they've been looking at maybe that TU Val can study and check out, something that a company that you think is good? I don't know if you had a chance to look in your chat.
I wrote it down on a piece of paper, but I don't know where that piece of paper is on my desk right now. But NVIDIA would be one of them, but there was a couple others that I got down from Charles Payne's, Charles, and no, I don't see it. Maybe next time.
Yeah, they talked about it at Bank, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think I have a similar little yellow slip of paper that has all the companies that they talked about at Bank. But what we can do is when we send out the note that says we have like a piece of the transcript, because Chris forgot to turn on the the videotape, that we can go ahead and share some of the stocks that we heard about at Bank in that same meeting. Sound good?
Some of the companies that they talked about at the panel are real interesting. I looked at a whole bunch of them. There's some really interesting ones there.
Yeah, I just wrote them all down and I haven't even had a chance to study them yet. So I have to definitely do that before the market starts getting better.
You want a chip company, buy Intel for the future.
Wow, we're not recommending buying anything. We're saying do your own research.
Yeah, look at Intel for the future. You're right.
But I was going to say, maybe if there's interest, we could look at the industry. Maybe as a committee, we can kind of talk about that before, and then we'll update the meeting notice. If you want to, if we look at either the industry or maybe even a specific stock, and you want to do up a stock study before the meeting, we can kind of come, if everybody can kind of come with maybe a stock that you've already done a study on, and we can kind of compare and contrast that, if that is interesting to people.
That seems like it would be a lot of fun, actually, to have a few different people. It's similar to what I think was Brian was saying about what they do is you know, you say why you chose this, you say why you chose this, same company, and get different people's reactions to it. Cause I'm sure that none of them are going to be the same.
Yep.
Cool.
Then if you
Okay.
do it on the first cut form, then you can send it in and have Susie decide which one she wants to publish.
There you go.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Janet.
This is Janet. How are you tonight?
Great. How are
Say,
you?
one of the ones I've looked at is ASML Holdings. Has anybody thought about that stock or been interested in it at all? That is a stock out of the Netherlands, and there's a lot of talk about it being very, very significant company. Anyhow, that would be one that I would recommend.
I want to say that that's one of the ones they talked about at Bank. It sounds
It
familiar
could
to me,
be.
especially when you talked about the Netherlands. I'm pretty sure that they talked about that one at Bank.
Yeah, I've heard some really good things. It's an expensive stock, but it sounds like it's one that might be worth having a little bit in your portfolio. So anyhow,
Yeah, ASML, and then two of the other ones that are listed as its peers are Applied Materials, AMAT, and Lam Research, which is LRCX.
yes. Be a great comparison.
Yeah, we could do that too. Okay, well, we'll talk about it amongst ourselves. And if you want to send any comments, Phil, do you know what our email address is?
I don't know that we have one.
Bob Poole, do you know what our email address is? There is one, I think. And it's just like something at whatever. I don't know.
Or it's contact at, just go to the chapter's webpage or
There you
press
go.
on that, or actually, Chris, you have an email on there, right on the thing. I think it's Education Committee, something like that.
Oh, we've been promoted. We have our own email.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is go to the online
You
chapter
got
and
it.
you can find ways to communicate with us. Yay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody so much for joining us today. We had a great time. I hope you did too. And we will we'll let you know as soon as we have the link to, like I said, I'll go back and recreate the beginning of the presentation where I did not have it turned on. And this time Phil can be with me so we can have a better beginning presentation. And then we'll shoot that link off to you when we have the recording finished. In the meantime, we meet the third Wednesday of every odd month at 8:30 Eastern time. So ask yourself, is this an odd month? And if it is, if it feels like an odd month, then go ahead and join us on the third Wednesday.
The next
Well,
one,
since COVID started, every month's an odd month.
Right. Yeah, so September 21st is our next meeting. And I hope you'll all be there.
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks, Patty. Glad you
And
could join
Phil.
us.
Yes, enjoyed it.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Excellent. Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good
Bye.
meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I actually got to meet Jane at Bink.
Right. I got to meet you. One of the other OLC people. That was great. You guys really gelled.
We had a good time. We did.
Ah.
you can probably stop the recording now.
Oh, geez. Oh, thank you. See, this is why I need a second person. I'm going to find it.
Got it.
Oh, here it is on the top. I was looking for it on the bottom.